Heard a big truck. Yeah, there's another truck behind us and a truck ahead. So that truck ahead right. Here we go. Welcome aboard. Cycle Commuter here on the bike share. Thank you for joining me on my way home from work. Don't know what day of the week it is, don't ask me. It's the morning though. On the bike share, we're gonna talk about the bike share. I kind of like it. It's a bit of a rainy day. Ooh, nice dog. Going through the government buildings. All right, so there's a few different ways we're going to break this down. I'm going to go over a little bit of the history of Toronto's bike share system. Then I'm going to talk about how it works as a user. GoPro, nice. I like this little shortcut here. We're gonna go through the how it works for a user. To give you an example, if you're not from Toronto. And then I'll go through how I personally use it, what I think is good, and what I think is not so good. All right. Keep this clean for you. All right, so bike share in Toronto. Since 2019, we got our bike share. Oh, there goes one. In 2011, bike share came to Toronto. Let's see how well this works. Should be okay. Here we go. Bike share came to Toronto in 2011 as part of Bixi. I think it was like Bixi Toronto or something. It didn't last very long. I think they started off with about 1,000 bicycles. I think that's what I read. And I think after about 3 years, they got into some financial trouble, declared bankruptcy. Basically, they defaulted on a loan to the city of Toronto. And in 2014, the city of Toronto took it over. It's actually owned by our parking authority. Thought that was interesting. And so that's 2014. So over the last 4 years, there's some pretty lucky funding infusions, I guess you can call them. They've had a relatively significant capital expenditure program that has seen pretty good expansion of the system. I think it's more than doubled. No, more than that. So I think it started with 1,000. I think what I read is that they're trying to get to, there's no stopping in this lane, so I kind of like to see stuff like that. That's why there's no stopping. Unless maybe they're turning left. Oh no, they were waiting to go, so it shouldn't be so mean. You gotta stay away from this truck. Plus it smells really bad, right? Got a truck behind us. Sorry, no rear view camera on this. It's gonna be a bit loud here. Keep an eye on that truck. Hopefully it takes them more than 8 seconds to get here. Is it coming? Here it comes. So this is the most unpleasant stretch. She gets a bit worse up there. Big truck. Take the lane. We're not inhibiting traffic at all, so there's no need to feel guilty. What I really like about that intersection back there, it has a really long red. So when I go through it like this, I know I have a pretty long gap. The car is behind me. Plus, there's no need to rush. I have a red light up here. Yes, I talked about these bikes when I did the, when I pretended it was a city bike. So, pretty good bikes. I like them. The truck is now behind us. This part's pretty brutal here because the lanes are really, really wide. Wider lanes mean people drive faster. So I usually try to avoid this. But we're on the bike share, so it's a little bit nicer on the bike share. Yeah, the bike share is really nice. We'll get into why I like it so much. Okay, oh, really bumpy here. So there's been a lot of funding from provincial and federal governments that allowed a pretty significant capital expenditure and expansion. I think the 2019 goal is to get to 6,000 bikes, which is a lot if you think about it. Ridership has increased significantly over the last 3 or 4 years. Oh, look at all these beautiful cycle commuters in the rain. Still got the truck beside us now. No safe place for cars to pass us or turn on the right, so we take the entire lane. Ridership, I think was under 1 million 3 years ago. Reached 1 million. I'll just wait. In 2017 was the first year I think they got over 1 million rides. 2018 I think they got close to 2 million. So I think those are pretty decent numbers. Certainly see them a lot. About 50% of Toronto's bike share rides are in June, July, and August. Not surprising. Toronto's bike share is riding over a bunch of rocks here. Is definitely concentrated around the downtown core of the city, and it's meant to kind of supplement public transit. So it's really nice that council has, officially adopted as a principle that bike share is treated with the same significance as public transit. The idea is that you use it for short rides to either get around downtown or to get between spots where you might like take the streetcar or the subway. So it's not really meant to replace anything, but except for short trips you would probably take by a bus or what would be a long walk. I think within mobility and transport, this kind of stuff, generally people consider a 5-kilometer radius as rideable. So I think the average person on one of these bikes probably goes around, I would say, 15, maybe 20 kilometers an hour. So a 5-kilometer radius will give you a 15 to 20 minute bike ride, which is not too bad. So that's why it's kind of designed for 30-minute rides or less. It's expanding right now outside of the core, which is nice to see. But I guess they're also kind of limited. They have to be careful with how quickly they expand, because the further you expand, the more expensive it becomes to operate. Some people criticize the bike share in that the revenues from users don't cover the operational costs. So some people use that as a criticism of the bike share system, saying it's a waste of money. But bike share is part of the public good. If you have people riding bikes to get around town, especially the core, you reduce congestion on the roads or on public transit. So it's quite myopic, I would say, to judge bike share by how well it can recover operating costs from revenues from users. Pretty neat. I found kind of a summary report from November 2018 that went to council, where they tried to benchmark the city of Toronto's bike share program versus other cities. Understandably, it's very difficult to obtain this kind of information, and not many bike share organizations in other cities share the details of their funding structure and how they cover operating revenues. The one thing that I was able to kind of decipher on my own is through the North American Bike Share Association. There was a survey from 2016 where 5 or 6 American cities kind of said what the operating cost was per ride, obviously in US dollars. So I remember off the top of my head, I think New York was there, I want to say Denver, maybe another city. There were obviously at least 3 more cities there. I was surprised that Toronto was less than all of them. So in the report they say that on a per ride basis it costs about $2 US dollars per ride for operational costs, whereas those 5 cities were, I think, $3 and something, like not less than $3.50. So overall, I think it's pretty impressive. The only other thing I have to say about the bike share is that there seem to be 2 kind of types of bike share these days. What I think is the older first generation bike share are dock-based bike share. This is what we have. So the bicycles are retrieved and returned at specific docks, specific locations. Especially within the downtown core, the standard seems to be about 200 to 300 meters apart. Let's see here. How we doing? We'll slow down. All right. We're good. Heard a big truck. Yeah, there's another truck behind us and a truck ahead. So that truck ahead, as you can see, takes up the entire lane. So to pass it, you need to merge into the lane with traffic right now. So normally, I'd have to be quite cautious, but especially because there's a truck who is going very slow for some reason. That guy. Trying to time it with them. So as I'm sure you can tell from my other videos, this is somewhat slower. My conscience is clear. So, yeah, the two types of bike share. So I just want to hurry for this one. This one always goes red. Good, we made it. So, the second generation of bike share are electric bicycles and also dockless. This is like Lime for a Canadian reference because it's the only one I know. Calgary, the Calgary bike share is Lime. Electric pedal assist bicycles that are dockless. I think there's a car behind us, just don't know why. Are they turning right or are they following? Yeah, they're turning right. Okay, good. So that's kind of the history of bike share. How does it work? Well, the way it works is you buy a membership. Memberships last 24 hours, 72 hours, or a year. For the duration of this membership, you have unlimited 30-minute rides. Let's see here. Okay. You can also just purchase a single 30-minute ride, but that's never really worth it in my opinion. So you have 30 minutes, unlimited, 30-minute rides. And if you exceed the 30 minutes, you get a pretty steep overage charge. So remember at the beginning I was kind of saying how this isn't meant to replace modes of transportation, but rather supplement and somewhat be integrated with them. Also, it's a bit of a operational exercise to keep the docks balanced. So sometimes you can see there are little crews that go around and they'll pick up a bunch of bikes from one dock and take them somewhere else. And so yeah, that's part of the reason why they limit or try to discourage really long rides. So that's kind of how it works as a user. So now I'll talk about, that's kind of like the logistics of using it. Now I'll talk a little bit about the experience, what's good, what's bad. So I like it a lot. They're pretty nice bikes. An annual membership costs less than 1 month pass, a monthly pass on our public transit system within the city. And if you use kind of our regional transit system from the outer suburbs, that's usually about 3 times the cost of our internal public transit system, just from talking to my colleagues and friends. So that kind of gives you an idea that it's like relatively cheap. I certainly think so. I think it's quite easy, quite nicely priced. So I think it's very attractive that way. It's great for getting around the city. This bike is probably, well actually I don't have to say probably. You know how in some neighborhoods they have those like, your speed is this, and kind of post a sign? So I've gone through those signs on my Commuter, which is a single speed. I top out around 36 kilometers an hour. That's about when I pedal out. So that's, I think, about 20 miles an hour. This bike is about 30% less slower. So in those same signs, the fastest I've ever gone is about 22, 23 kilometers an hour. In terms of average speed going through city, my average speed on my commuter bike is between, I would say, 22 to 25 kilometers an hour. On this thing, it's usually around 18 kilometers an hour, maybe a bit less. But the amazing thing is, even on this relatively slow bike with only 3 gears, when I'm in the core of the city, especially during kind of high hours, it's like 7 a.m. right now, so I wouldn't say this is a high traffic hour. They're driving fast. In terms of peak hours like that, it's still faster than driving a car around the city, like way faster. So if you want to get around, I would say like the downtown, these bike shares are really good. The other reason I really like these bikes is because you don't have to worry about locking them up. So it's really convenient if you're going to a part of town where you might not want to lock up your nice bike. Don't got to worry about it with these bikes. The other interesting thing, going back to like how it's designed to be used in conjunction with other modes. For Toronto's bike share, almost 40% of the annual members are outside of the service area, and almost 10% are outside of what we would consider the city of Toronto. So to me, that kind of shows how people are using it to complement other modes. They kind of get into the core, and then they use the bikes to get around the core. So I think that's relatively high, which is, I think, a good thing. Really good thing. There are some things I don't like about the bike share. The main one is that you gotta kind of get used to it in terms of how you plan your trips. And you have to be mindful of the 30-minute limit. I've got an alarm set. So I think we're gonna dock at the next dock. I know where it is. This is kind of my neighborhood. Reset the timer, that's the trick. Dock it, undock it, reset, get another free 30-minute ride. The other thing I don't really like about it that much is that it kind of incentivizes people to take what are sometimes not the best shortcuts to save time. When you have a time limit with a really high overage charge, you're pretty incentivized to run red lights, go through stop signs. Stop signs, I adhere to the stop as yield rule, but then you know, you have a pretty strong incentive to run red lights. So I'm not that big of a fan of that. Oh, the one thing I forgot to say about funding, it seems that based on the information that our city could gather, the average is that about 40% of revenues for other bike shares are covered by the user revenues. And a big piece is corporate sponsorship. And somehow that's missing. We don't really have that. I wonder why. But yeah, that's the dock there that we're going to use. We're just going to go up on the sidewalk here. And we're going to park the bike. And I'm going to thank you for joining me, because the rest of the ride, I don't think it's going to be that interesting for you. So thank you. Share, like, subscribe, comment. Let me know what you think. Thanks. We're good. Cheers.